I never imagined I'd live through something so horrific, something that would scar my soul forever. I remember waking up that morning like it was any other day, April 5th. It was supposed to be a day of celebration. We had balloons in the hallway, streamers hanging from the ceiling, and a cake with 2 names written in blue icing. Happy birthday, Ethan and Noah. My nephews were turning 5 and 7. My sister, Claire, was so excited. She had planned this party for weeks. The invitations had little dinosaurs on them, and the goodie bags were already packed. Everyone was coming, friends, neighbors, family. But no one, not even for a second, could have imagined what was truly about to happen behind closed doors. And no one imagined what her husband, a man we trusted, a man we welcomed into our family, was planning. Pause, deep breath. I was supposed to be there earlier that morning to help Claire decorate the backyard. She texted me at 7:32 a.m. Don't forget the candles. See you soon, Red Heart. That was the last message I ever got from her. Soft piano transitions into a darker, more haunting melody. Around 9 a.m., my phone rang. It was a neighbor. Her voice was shaking, nearly unintelligible. She said there were sirens, police, yellow tape. Something's wrong, she whispered. Claire's house. You need to come. I drove like a madman. I didn't even put on shoes, just grabbed my keys and ran. Every minute felt like an hour. My heart was pounding so hard, I could barely hear the road beneath me. And then I saw it, the house. The place that once smelled like cookies and crayons, now covered in police tape, SWAT vans, paramedics, and silence, dead silence. I screamed her name, Claire, but no answer. They wouldn't let me inside. An officer pulled me aside, gently. I remember the way his eyes looked, haunted, like he'd seen something no one should ever see. He asked if I was related. I nodded. He put a hand on my shoulder and said, I'm sorry, there are no survivors. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't speak. I fell to my knees, right there on the driveway. How could this be real? How could the man she married, the father of those innocent boys, do something like this? The media coverage exploded overnight, and I found myself at the center of a storm I never asked for. Reporters camped outside my building, speculating about my relationship to the case, my career, and even my personal life. I had to navigate each day with extreme caution, knowing that any misstep could cost me my credibility and the delicate peace I'd fought so hard to preserve. Behind closed doors, my grief had turned into a dull ache, something always there, like a shadow in the corner of my soul. I kept remembering the birthday banner we had all planned together for the boys, the tiny hats, the Spider-Man cake they had begged for. All of it had been boxed up and returned to the bakery and party planner, both of whom sent their heartfelt condolences. It was the little reminders that cut the deepest. The socks still in the laundry hamper, the half-finished drawing one of the boys left on the kitchen table, the voicemail from my wife asking if I'd remembered to pick up balloons. How could something so vibrant, so full of life, be extinguished in a moment of madness? I immersed myself in work not out of passion but out of necessity. Silence became unbearable. I couldn't sleep without the hum of a podcast or the background noise of city life. Therapy became my lifeline, the one place where I could speak freely without judgment. As the trial approached, I prepared to see his face again, the man who shattered my world. But I knew I wouldn't crumble. I owed it to them, to every memory, every smile, every bedtime story. I would see this through to the end. The day of the trial finally arrived, heavy with the weight of everything it represented. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs, journalists scribbling notes, cameras flashing outside the windows. I sat in the front row, stone-faced, but inside, a tempest brewed. When he walked in, his face passive, as if this were just another mundane event, I felt a chill crawl up my spine. There was no remorse in his eyes, no grief, just emptiness. As the prosecution laid out the timeline, the evidence, the cold, mechanical execution of his own family, I clenched my fists to keep from shaking. Photos of the crime scene flashed on the monitors, photos I had already seen, but which still hit like a blow to the chest. The defense tried to paint him as a man under pressure, overwhelmed by financial ruin, mental health issues, and fear of failure. But none of that excused what he did. Nothing ever could. When I was called to testify, the room fell silent. I stood, took my oath, and spoke with a clarity I didn't know I still possessed. I told the court who they were, my wife and sons. I spoke not of their deaths, but of their lives. The way my youngest would mispronounce spaghetti as paschetti, how my wife used to hum while folding laundry, how our older boy once made a super dad card out of cardboard and glue and presented it to me with a proud grin. I made them human again. I made sure the jury saw more than just names on paper or photos in an evidence folder. I wanted them to understand that these weren't just victims, they were my world. The silence after my testimony was absolute. Even the judge looked affected. I stepped down, heart pounding, tears threatening, but not falling. I had done what I came to do, honor them, even in the darkest place. As the trial progressed, I watched as more pieces of the puzzle were laid bare. Witnesses recounted his strange behavior in the days leading up to the murders, withdrawn, paranoid, unhinged. A neighbor recalled hearing laughter one evening, followed by an eerie silence that lingered far too long. Another testified that he'd recently asked about how to vanish without a trace. The prosecution presented damning forensic evidence: gunshot residue, digital footprints, receipts, and chilling diary entries that outline the plan with grotesque precision. The image of him methodically buying party decorations just hours before pulling the trigger haunts me more than I can explain. The most devastating moment came when the 911 call was played, his voice flat, as he told the dispatcher he'd taken care of things. No panic, no regret, just resignation. That was the moment many on the jury seemed to grasp the gravity of the evil they were confronting. Some looked away. One woman quietly wept. I couldn't. I forced myself to listen, to remember every word, because I owed that to my family. I owed it to the truth. When closing arguments began, I sat frozen, watching as both sides made their final appeals. The defense tried one last time to spin his mental state as the root cause, but the prosecution didn't falter. They laid bare the timeline, the intent, the calculation. There was no break, no loss of control. This was a decision, premeditated and executed with haunting calmness. And finally, after days that felt like decades, the jury was dismissed to deliberate. I waited. I paced. I prayed not for vengeance, but for justice. I thought about the birthdays we'd never celebrate, the hugs I'd never feel again, the laughter that would never return to our home. And when the jury returned, I held my breath as the foreperson stood. Guilty, she said. Guilty on all counts. The room didn't erupt. There were no cheers, just silence. Heavy, reverent silence. I exhaled, slowly. It wasn't CL. After the verdict was read, I remained in my seat, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, not from tension anymore, but from exhaustion. Emotional, spiritual, mental exhaustion. The kind that settles into your bones and doesn't leave for a long time. The bailiff asked if I was okay. I nodded. I wasn't, but I had learned how to survive the moments when grief presses so hard on your chest, it feels like you might collapse. I watched as he was escorted out of the courtroom, shackled and stone-faced. For a moment, he looked at me. I didn't return the gaze. There was nothing left to see. That man who had once been the center of my world was now a stranger, someone I never truly knew, someone capable of taking everything from me with a cold, measured hand. I walked out of the courthouse into a blinding sun, one of those crisp mornings where the air bites at your skin and makes everything feel realer, sharper. The cameras were waiting, reporters with their microphones. I kept walking. I didn't owe them a story. The only people I owed anything to were already gone, buried beneath the earth on a hill I visited every week with fresh flowers and trembling hands. But something had shifted. Not closure, not healing, but a beginning, a quiet permission to breathe again. I went home, not to the house we shared. That place was sold long ago, but to the apartment I had slowly made my own. Sparse, quiet, filled with small plants and sunlight. And there, in the silence, I sat with their photos. I whispered apologies. I whispered I love yous. I whispered that I would keep going, not for him, but for them. Because their lives, however short, were filled with light. They deserved to be remembered in peace, not in the shadow of what had happened to them. I promised I would live in a way that honored them. I promised to rebuild, even if my hands were shaking. The days that followed weren't cinematic or dramatic. They were quiet, almost too quiet. I filled them with little routines because that's what kept me from unraveling. Watering the plants every morning, walking the same trail near the river, making tea even if I didn't finish drinking it. It sounds silly, but small acts of normalcy became anchors in the storm. Grief doesn't leave suddenly. It lingers, curling itself into corners of your mind and reappearing in moments you least expect. A laugh you hear that sounds like his. A little boy wearing the same superhero costume my son once wore. A song playing faintly in a coffee shop that your wife used to hum while cooking. But instead of letting those moments break me, I let them sit beside me. I learned not to run from them. The pain didn't get smaller, but I got stronger. Strong enough to carry it differently. I joined a support group eventually, not because I believed anyone could understand, but because I was tired of feeling like a ghost in my own life. And strangely, hearing others share their pain made me feel less alone. Our stories were different, but the ache was the same. I started journaling. I started volunteering, especially with children. It felt right. I wasn't replacing what I lost. Nothing could ever do that. But I was finding purpose again. That was the hardest part to explain to anyone. You don't move on from something like this. You move forward, dragging your scars with you, trying not to let them define you. Over time, I spoke more openly about what had happened, not to relive the horror, but to make sure my family's memory wasn't reduced to headlines or court transcripts. They were more than victims. They were laughter, warm hugs, messy pancakes on Sunday mornings, bedtime stories with silly voices, late-night whispers, and dreams about the future. That's what I want the world to remember. Not the man who took them from me, but the beautiful lives they lived before he did. As time went on, the pieces of my life that had once felt so shattered began to form something new, though it never quite felt whole again. You learn to live with what happened, not because it doesn't hurt, but because you understand that life still continues, with or without the people you thought would be by your side forever. The anger I once carried slowly turned into a quiet resolve. I didn't need vengeance. What had happened could never be undone, and no amount of hatred would bring them back. I focused on building something positive, something that would honor their memory in a way that wasn't about revenge or bitterness. I became involved in mental health advocacy, working with local shelters and therapy programs. It wasn't easy at first. Nothing worth doing ever is, but there was healing in it. Helping others helped me understand my own pain better, and I felt like I was starting to be able to breathe again. Years passed. The court trials and media frenzy faded into the background. People stopped talking about what had happened, and that was okay. It was enough to know I was still carrying my family's story forward, even if others had forgotten. My grief, like my healing, had become something personal. I'd learned to laugh again, to find joy in simple things, like a new book or a beautiful sunset. And though the grief never really leaves, it no longer defined me. It had become a part of who I was, but not all of me. I was finally able to start over in the way I needed to redefine my life, my purpose, my future. But that doesn't mean I stopped thinking about them. I thought about the way they had filled my world with light. I thought about how my wife's eyes sparkled when she talked about our plans for the future, and how my children's laughter could fill a room. And as painful as those memories still were, they also reminded me of how much love there had been, how much good. That was the legacy I wanted to leave behind, the good they brought into. As time moved forward, I began to understand something deeper, that life isn't just about the moments we live with those we love, but also how we carry them within us long after they're gone. There's a weight to it, yes. There are days where the grief surges again, sharp and sudden. It catches you off guard like a wave crashing into a shore, and you wonder how you're still standing. But then there are other days, calmer days, where the memories of them bring a warmth instead of sorrow. And I learned that it's okay to embrace both, the sorrow and the warmth. It's a balance I never thought I'd be able to strike, but somehow, in the quiet moments, I found peace. The hardest part wasn't just losing them. It was the fact that their deaths had been caused by someone I had loved, someone I had trusted. It was the betrayal that cut deeper than anything else. It's one thing to lose someone through illness or fate, but to lose them because of the hands of the very person who was supposed to protect them. That was a different kind of pain. I spent countless nights trying to understand how someone could do something so unimaginable, but I realized that understanding wasn't going to change anything. It didn't matter why he did it, because it would never bring them back. In the years that followed, I began to make choices to create a future that wasn't solely defined by the pain of that moment. I realized that life would always have its share of darkness, but it was up to me to find the light, even if it was just a small spark at first. Slowly, I rebuilt my world. It wasn't easy. Some days, it felt like I was just going through the motions. But little by little, I found new meaning in the things I was doing. I started to understand that my purpose wasn't just to mourn the past, but to live for the future, to live in a way that honored the love I'd lost. Through everything, I never gave up on the idea that love could heal. I learned that even in the aftermath,